Okay, this is going to be a quickly and sloppily put together episode because I feel that it might be necessary to talk about these female custodies everybody's banging on about. For those of you who've been living underneath a hobby rock recently, what I'm talking about here is Games Workshop's recent release of Female Custodes miniatures for Warhammer 40k, and the fact that a large proportion of the community on both sides of the argument seem to be losing their absolute minds over it. So I thought I'd insert my 2p just for good measure. Now, I don't think anybody should be surprised that this has happened. It's been hinted at for a while. There was the debacle earlier on last year where it had been put in some sort of publication that there were female custodes, and then supposedly that was retconned later by the Warhammer 40,000 Ultimate Guide that's supposedly stuck to its guns by saying that they were all brothers and that there weren't any sisters. So there was supposedly one side of the argument who was celebrating a little mini victory there, but I think, to be perfectly honest, everybody should have just known at that time. The Games Workshop isn't going to listen to its customers. They are going to do whatever they like regardless. So there's the first bit of the outrage that I think we should just calm down about, is that everybody knew that this was coming, so it's not a surprise. But obviously everybody's been calm, measured, and taken a sensible approach to their arguments without employing belligerent rhetoric online. Oh no, I've just remembered, this is the internet, isn't it? And there have been more than a few, in inverted commas, influencers and hobby channels out there taking advantage of rage baiting and rage clicking to make money off the situation, and we all know who they are. I'm going to take a slightly more balanced approach because I can see arguments on both sides that make perfect sense in this situation, and then after this video this will be the only thing that I say on this subject, and I'll put it to bed. I think the main argument against the addition of female custodes has been from the reaction of Games Workshop when people have pushed back who are into the lore. Now, I mean, this is not just a tabletop hobby for a lot of people. It's very involved. A lot of people like the books. A lot of people read the books, don't play the games. A lot of people like the video games, don't play the tabletop games. Some people paint miniatures, don't play any of the games whatsoever. And the fact that there's 30 plus years worth of lore and books, and there's never once been a mention of female custodes. In fact, they work in tandem in the lore with a very awesome idea, which is their female counterparts, the Sisters of Silence, who may have been slightly influenced by a little book called Dune. They're a little bit Bene Gesserit, but then again, that's the entire Warhammer 40k setting, and I suggest that if any of you get some time, go and read Dune. It's basically, if you want to go back to the Rogue Trader days, it very much looked like Dune and 2000 AD had a strange baby, and it became a tabletop game, and that became Warhammer 40k, but that is a completely different story and a completely different argument. Anyway, back to the point in hand. Games Workshop basically turned around to people who are well involved in this hobby and said, it's not canon, this has never happened, why are you doing this now? And said, no, they've always been there, end of story, and that's that. Now, this is what's popularly known and probably an overused phrase nowadays, which is it's gaslighting. And for those of you who are not aware what gaslighting is, it's named after a 1944 film that was originally a book where a husband deliberately tries to drive his wife insane by, in inverted commas, gaslighting her. And in English, what he's doing is he's dimming the gas lights in the house, and then when she notices it, he's telling her that it's not happening and that her memory's faulty and that she has to question her own sanity. Also stops her from leaving the house, stops her from seeing friends, pursuing a career, also that he can cover up a murder and look for jewels in the house. So he's lying to her and making her doubt herself. And this is basically what Games Workshop have been doing to the fans. People know that this is not something that's always been there. They're well into their lore, they're well into the history of it. Some of us old sods even remember the lore at the beginning. And then there's the argument from the other side that there were always female Space Marine miniatures. There weren't. There were a couple of miniatures that were in packs that went out in the late 80s, early 90s, and basically nobody bought them, so the shop owners told them to stop sending them out because they were a waste of space on the shelves. And they were proto Sisters of Battle. They even say Sisters on the packet. I remember seeing the packets. There were never female Space Marines and there were never Custodes because that wasn't even a thing back then. So so I don't think you can count those either. So that's the main argument that I've heard against it, and I kind of agree. But, and there is a but, there always is going to be a but, there is an element of the fan base that have a very strong whiff of no girls allowed about them, and that makes many people, myself included, a little uncomfortable. Now, there are always going to be a minority of people who are genuine out there, but sometimes you can take a step back and think about things before you post or before you say them, because it doesn't always paint you in the best light. And I get the arguments, I understand, and just for full clarity, I don't particularly like Female Custodes miniatures myself, but I think there's a different solution rather than ranting online and calling everybody whatever the current phrase is, woke, SJWs, political lunatics, whatever it is that you want to call them. It doesn't paint anybody who might have a reasonable argument against this in a very good light. But, and at the same time, it doesn't mean that absolutely everybody, and I count myself included in this, who doesn't like the idea of this, is a raging, overweight, virginal neckbeard. Because there are other parallels when you look at parts of the Games Workshop genres. For example, there wasn't a massive backlash against female Stormcast Eternals when they first came in, and there's a very good reason for that. And again, there was this very small clique of potential and alleged virginal neckbeards who were in the No Girls Allowed club who objected to it, and then there were people on the other side of the argument who said, yes, fine, let's have female Stormcast Eternals, but no boob-shaped armour. And to be fair, I don't think the sculpts are that bad. They've got armour that clearly looks like they're supposed to encapsulate a female chest as opposed to a male chest, but there's no sort of separate boob ridges or anything like that, and I think the sculpts overall are a nice compromise. But the key point in the argument here is there was no major backlash in the way that there has been with this to female Stormcast Eternals, and the reason is that the law was brand new, so they wrote them in from scratch with no issues. The problem that I think a lot of people are having is the retcon and then being told that this was a thing all along, and if you didn't like it and you never noticed it, it's your problem, and if you don't like it now, then you're a misogynist and blah 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 and all the other insults that get thrown around, which clearly doesn't help, and it's clearly not true for everybody who doesn't like them. People are allowed to not like things. People are allowed to like things. I may have mentioned in one of my other videos Hello Kitty Space Marines. Not my cup of tea, not my miniatures, and that's the bloody point. If you want to paint your Space Marines Hello Kitty, it's your choice and sod everybody else. But Hello Kitty Space Marines are not purported to be official canon. And here's another little bit of information that may unfortunately upset some people out there. If Games Workshop suddenly had some sort of an aneurysm collectively and decided that Hello Kitty Space Marines were going to be canon, it is their choice. They do own the canon, and I think maybe, possibly, although that's an extreme case and me engaging in absurdo reductum slightly, but if they'd have gone around this maybe a slightly different way by rather than trying to retcon and gaslight everybody, and possibly went down the route of just writing and updating new law, I don't know, off the top of my head, they needed to incorporate female Custodes for some specific reason that I can't be bothered to pull out my backside right now. There are plenty of teams of writers out there with enough talent that I'm sure they could have come up with some reason to write them in as a new occurrence, as opposed to trying to tell everybody that they've been there all along. That may have sat a lot better or a lot more comfortably with quite a few of the fan base, and then you would still, in fact, it'd be a way of weeding out the people who are always going to scream about this kind of thing, because if you'd have been given a perfectly reasonable reason for Female Custodes to be a new addition, then the only real reason that you could object to them is the No Girls Allowed club, which I think is something else to bear in mind. But, and again, there's always going to be another but, there are other options out there. Nobody is forcing you to buy these miniatures. I certainly won't be buying them. It's a very cliched phrase now, to vote with your wallet. It's a little bit like casting your political vote. If Games Workshop have cancelled lines before in the past, many times over, that don't make money. If you don't like these miniatures, you don't like the idea of them, you can't make them go away. The only thing you can do is not buy them. Don't support them. It's as simple as that. Let's not forget that they did get rid of the entire Warhammer Fantasy battle range because it wasn't making enough money, and people adored that. But I would urge people to do it quietly and respectfully. You don't need to rant about it online. Just don't buy them and move on. We've seen this kind of thing with other franchises. We've seen Disney do this to things like Star Wars. I'm not going to sit here and rant about The Last Jedi. I just went to the pictures, saw it, didn't enjoy it, and then decided never to watch it again. I wouldn't sit there raging about it. Just quietly walk away. There's nothing to stop you from playing your 40k games without including them. Just the same way that people complain and rant about the latest edition of D&D. There's absolutely nothing to stop you and your D&D group playing 4th edition or even 5th edition and just using the parts you like and disregarding the parts you don't like. It is still more or less a free country out there. You can do whatever the hell you want, and I'm sure you can all come to an agreement with your friends that you might want to add certain elements, you might want to drop certain elements in certain games. I mean, 40k is not the be all and end all. As somebody who's had quite a passion about tabletop hobbies, including painting and playing games for decades now, trust me, there are more companies out there than Games Workshop. I'm well aware that they're the biggest and they've got the biggest sphere of influence, but the miniatures are awesome. The lore is great. This may just be my opinion, but the games are mediocre at best. One of my favourite things to do is use their miniatures in other games, on other rule sets. There are plenty of really good miniature agnostic rule sets out there. There are much better games out there, things like Malifaux. Some of the Mantic games are great. They're quick, they're easy, they're nice to pick up. You don't have to stick to Games Workshop. All I'm saying is quietly walk away and stop embarrassing yourself. If you don't like them, nobody is forcing you to buy them, and you're not winning some sort of culture war by making yourself look like a Simpsons character online. What's more, it feeds the opposite side because they're then able to paint you as the absolute prats that you're kind of making yourself look like. I mean, don't forget, what was it, Mark Twain paraphrased George Bernard Shaw, I think it was? Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. And that's what you're doing with these people when you're arguing with them. You're making the point for them because you are acting a little bit like a complete prat. Plus, on another side note, if you're that deep into this hobby that it's got you this enraged, you might want to take a step back, because there's more to life than painting toy soldiers and pushing them on tabletop to win pretend battles. Don't get me wrong, like I've mentioned before, I've been in this hobby for decades, but it's certainly not the be-all and end-all, despite the fact that I've got a YouTube channel that's revolving around it. I've got much more important things in my life. I've got a beautiful wife and a daughter and other things to be grateful for. I've got an extended family, I've got friends, I've got other hobbies. I keep fit, I'm a musician. Don't allow yourself to get pigeonholed so much that this kind of thing is that enraging to you. It's really not that important. So go outside, get some fresh air, read Dune. If you're feeling a bit more adventurous, next time you've got flu and you're not quite with it, take some prescribed chemicals and then watch the 1984 film version of Dune by David Lynch. That'll be an eye-opener.